Hello, my name is Pankaj and I have completed my PhD from IIT Bombay in the Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering. And I already had a teaching experience. I mentored students for the preparation of entrance exam like medical entrance exam like GATE Life Science and CSIR NEET JRF. So in this lecture today I am going to discuss about metabolism. So let's start. So metabolism, what is metabolism? Metabolism is a chemical reactions that occurs inside the cells, and this metabolic reactions occurs by to generate energy and also to synthesize the molecules. So this metabolism occurs the cells, or we can say like thousands of chemical reactions occurs inside the cells in a very regulated way, right? For example, when we see, it's a very simple reactions, metabolic process where we can see A respiratory substrate or A substrate is got converted into B products, whereas in case of B products becomes a substrate for this reactions and it converted into C and then subsequently to D. So this metabolic reactions occurs inside these cells and in a very highly coordinated manner, and it's interdependent reactions, right? So if any of these products will get missed out, then this whole reaction will be will not complete. Okay. So this metabolism can be categorized into three different types like catabolic, anabolic and amphibolic. So this catabolic metabolism is defined as a breakdown of molecules, whereas in case of anabolic we can say that there is a synthesis of molecules occurs, and this amphibolic metabolic reactions where the combination of both reactions occurs, where synthesis as well as breakdown occurs, right? So metabolic reactions can be categorized into linear, cyclic as well as spiral, right? So if there is some reaction which is linearly arranged is known as linear metabolic process. In this example we can clearly see that A becomes T by the linear metabolic process, whereas in case of cyclic there is a process of cyclic reaction occurs, and whereas spiral is a spiral way of metabolic reactions occurs. So the example of linear metabolic reactions is a glycolysis, which we are going to discuss further in this lecture, whereas the example of cyclic reactions we can say is a Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, and in case of spiral the fatty acid synthesis occurs in the form of a spiral metabolic process. Okay, so in this lecture we are going to discuss about respiration, which is a part of metabolic reactions, which is a metabolic reaction where actually in the oxidation of organic compound occurs. For example, in this case where the organic compounds such as glucose molecules like proteins, fats occurs, where in case of plants this molecules has been generated through photosynthesis, whereas in animals or humans this has been taken through the diets, right? So in respiration the breakdown of molecules occurs, so we can say that respiration is a catabolic process, whereas in this case the respiratory substrate that has been utilized is glucose, protein or fats. However, in this case the preference of respiratory substrate is in most of the cases is glucose. However, when there is a harsh environment or harsh condition, for example when there is no glucose molecules available through dietary source, then the stored fats or protein has been utilized as a respiratory substrate. Okay, so this respiratory substrate goes into the breakdown, and this breakdown can be either incomplete or complete breakdown. So this incomplete breakdown occurs where there is absence of oxygen, or we can say that oxygen independent pathway usually occurs in the anaerobic organism where there is absence of oxygen, so it is called as anaerobic respiration. Whereas in complete breakdown it is oxygen dependent and usually occurs in the organism which usually respires through using the oxygen. So this is known as aerobic respiration. Okay, so in this lecture we are going to discuss mostly about the aerobic respiration. Okay, so in the aerobic respiration where we can see this is the formula of glucose, that is C6H12O6 in presence of oxygen, completely converted into completely break down into carbon dioxide and water, and during the process of breakdown it releases energy in the form of ATP as well as heat. So one molecule of complete breakdown of glucose will generate approximately 686 kilocalorie, and also in terms of chemical we can say it generates 30/32 ATP molecules. So why we have written 30/32 ATP molecules, you will get to know later in this lectures. So when we consider the aerobic respiration, there are three different reactions occurs, that is glycolysis, citric acid cycle, and then oxidative phosphorylation. So glycolysis usually occurs in cytosol, whereas the citric acid cycle occurs in matrix of mitochondria, and oxidative phosphorylation occurs in the inner membrane of mitochondria by the use of inner membrane of mitochondria. So if you wanted to visualize, so when we look at the cells, this cells is usually typical eukaryotic cells which contains a nucleus, and this is a double membranous structure, that is cell membrane, that is this is a mitochondria, and also there are other organelles. It contains all different organelles such as ribosome and other stuff. So in this case we clearly see that this is a cytosol where the glycolysis occurs, and the enzyme of glycolysis occurs in the cytosol, whereas in case of citric acid cycle it occurs inside the matrix of mitochondria, whereas the oxidative phosphorylation it occurs with the help of, or it involves the inner membrane of mitochondria. Okay, so now coming to the we are going to read one by one what is the glycolysis, citric acid cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation, and how three things are interrelated or coordinated, which generates eventually 30/32 ATP molecules. So first we are going to discuss about glycolysis. In the glycolysis, as we have already discussed, that it occurs in a cytosol, and it is a 10 steps process, and it is a linear type process. We have already classified that metabolism has been classified into linear, cyclic, and spiral. So glycolysis is a linear type of metabolic reactions. So we can categorize glycolysis into two types, that is energy consuming part where the ATP molecule consumed, whereas in another part, that is energy generation where ATP and NADH generated, or we can say that is where the ATP molecule consumed, it is known as preparatory phase, where the energy generation molecules occurs, it is known as a payoff phase. Okay, now this glycolysis is also known as a Embden-Meyerhof pathway, and this because this is the name of the scientist, so hence glycolysis is also known as Embden-Meyerhof pathway. So this glycolysis eventually use one glucose molecule, and this one glucose molecule eventually or finally generates two molecules of pyruvate, that is two molecules of pyruvate. This pyruvate is a 3 carbon atoms molecule, so when it generates two molecules of pyruvate, then it becomes 6 carbon atoms. So this 6 carbon atoms remains the same, it remains the generates 6 carbon atoms of the molecules. Okay, now considering this glycolysis, there are different steps involved in the glycolysis. I have already told that it's a 10 steps process, and there are different enzymes involved in each of the process. For example, so the first steps of glycolysis is glucose. So glucose usually comes inside the cells by using membranous structure present in the cell membrane, and it comes inside the cell with the help of. So when it comes inside the cell, there is an hexokinase that is present inside the cells. It usually phosphorylate glucose to the phosphorylated glucose. So this glucose becomes glucose 6 phosphate. So this phosphate has been phosphorylated by hexokinase enzyme using ATP, where the overall charge in the glucose becomes negative. So due to which this glucose 6 phosphate will not get outside of the cells. Right? Then there is another enzyme that comes into play, that is phosphoglucoisomerase. This phosphoglucoisomerase converts glucose 6 phosphate into fructose 6 phosphate. Okay, so you can here see that this is wherever the hexokinase enzyme involved, it is an irreversible reaction, whereas in this case this is a reversible reaction, right? So this glucose 6-phosphate is converted into fructose 6-phosphate with the help of phosphoglucoisomerase. This again fructose 6-phosphate again get phosphorylated with the help of an enzyme phosphofructokinase. This again 1 ATP phosphorylated again with the help of phosphofructokinase, and it fructose 6-phosphate becomes fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Okay, so fructose 1,6-bisphosphate contains 2-phosphate, and with the help of an enzyme that is aldolase, it usually breaks down into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Okay, so here we can clearly see that this is from till glucose to fructose 1,6-phosphate, the carbon atoms remain the same, that is 6 carbon. Here you can see that the 6 carbon till fructose 1,6-bisphosphate, the carbon atoms, or there is only one molecules involved. However, in case of aldolase, the fructose 1,6-bisphosphate get breakdowns into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Okay, so this glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate contains 3 carbon and dihydroxyacetone phosphate contains 3 carbon, right? The carbon atoms remains the same, that is 6 carbon. The total carbon is 6 carbon, right? And they are also present in a reversible condition with the help of triose isomerase. So here you can see I am describing the energy consuming part, or you can say the preparatory part of the glycolysis, right? So here we can clearly see there's a 2 ATP molecules have been utilized, right, here and here. Okay, so there are 2 ATP molecules have been utilized to produce glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate. This is a preparatory phase. In the next lecture I am going to describe the payoff phase. So till now I have already told you that it is a 10 steps process, enzymatic process, 10 steps process of reaction. However, till now I have discussed first, second, third, fourth, fifth, right? This is first, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, this is 5. So there is a 5 steps of reaction till now I have discussed. In the next part of the glycolysis, it is a payoff phase which I am going to discuss in the next lecture, right? Okay, thank you.